Hey, Lighthouse Church, Pastor Jason here, and this is the very short and abridged Silent Saturday or Holy Saturday service. Maybe in the future we can gather together and do this in person, but I wanted to go ahead and start adding implements each year to the final week of Christ's life. Remember, of all of the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all of them devote 50%, give or take, of their writing to the final week. And as a church, it's important as the church for us to follow suit and really put emphasis, having had the opportunity to really push forward the gospel, the life, the ministry, the death, the burial of Jesus Christ. And so this is Silent Saturday. We had our Seder meal. We enjoyed the time of the Seder. We've had our Good Friday service where we left very somber. As we are in redemptive history, probably there on April 4th, Nisan 15 of AD 33, the disciples would still be absolutely terrified. They'd be locked up in a room. They would be by themselves. And they really wouldn't know what to do, probably working through trauma and all of the things. And so they're just probably by themselves, just trying to Sabbath, because it would have been the Sabbath. In fact, during the reign of Pontius Pilate, there's only 2 times where the actual Sabbath would have corresponded just after Passover, where they would have eaten the Passover meal into the Sabbath. And that would have been AD 30, it would have been AD 33. Both correspond with the bookends of the ministry of Jesus. Very interesting. That is not a common occurrence if you look at the Jewish calendar, which is why historians and theologians really do believe that it was very likely AD 30 or AD 33 with this text. So we have a very good idea that it's very likely that April 3rd of AD 33 was when Christ was crucified. This would have been the next day. And so what we have throughout church history is a lot of speculation. So what took place? So let me read one of the final things said by Jesus on the cross. It wasn't his final, but it is one of his final. And he says in Luke 23, 42, he says to the thief on the cross, the thief says to him, "Remember me when you come into the kingdom." And Jesus said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Now notice the thief says kingdom and Jesus says paradise. Now what is paradise? Well, it's a word that's used 3 times in the New Testament, a couple of other times in the Old, but we see it in 2 Corinthians 12:4, when Paul says he was caught up into the 3rd heaven. He saw great mysteries. We see paradise is restored in Revelation 2. But one of the most specific texts that I think is really helpful, we see in Luke 16. Now Jesus, when he's teaching the disciples, the Pharisees are listening in, and Jesus teaches this, and it's known not as a parable, but as a teaching. And so it's an unusual story, but it's a story that's helpful because today is Silent Saturday. We're trying to get a gauge on where's Jesus? What is Jesus doing while his body lay in the tomb? Now we know from the Shroud of Turin, which is not a Catholic relic, it's an artifact of the church. And we know from the Shroud of Turin that based upon its creases that Jesus, his actual body was entering into rigor. It was entering into rigor mortis. And though his body did not decay, it was in fact stiffening. And you can see that in the way that the blood was pooling and some other factors of the shroud. And so we know that his body was there. We know that it was there. We know that it left the tomb, it left the shroud with a dazzling, brilliant display of power and energy. We know that. All of these things are powerfully, scientifically looked at. In fact, some of the first times in history we were able to see that. But where was his soul? So he was fully man and he was fully God. And And we are made in his image. So we are body and we are soul. We are not fully man and fully God. We are fully body and fully soul. And so every soul will spend eternity. Every soul will spend eternity back with their physical bodies. And this is Jesus here in this moment as the first fruits. Now, this text in Luke that Jesus is teaching to the disciples and to the Pharisees, he says this: there was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, who feasted sumptuously every day. And at the gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment. He lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water to cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us is a great chasm that has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, that none may cross from there to us." And he said, "Then I beg you, Father, send him to my father's house, that I have five brothers, so that they may warn them, lest them also come to this place of torment." But Abraham said, "They have Moses, the prophets, and let them hear." And he said, "No, Father Abraham, but if somebody goes to them from the dead, they will repent." And he said to him, "If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced by someone who should rise from the dead." Now, when you look at this passage and you begin to see that this is very common Jewish understanding. Jewish understanding in the ancient Near East in the first century would have borrowed from Greek language. So like, for instance, in English, if somebody says, "Oh man, karma is a tough thing." Well, you don't have to believe in karma or be Hindu to understand what that means. It's a borrowed phrase that is brought into English. So if somebody says, "Oh man, karma's tough," well then you know, again, not Hindu, not Hindi speaking, but you understand the phrase. It's borrowed from another culture. Paradise is like that. Paradise has its origination in Greek culture. And remember, after the intertestamental period, which is just the period between the Old and the New, Alexander the Great conquered the known world. So much was turned Greek or made Hellenized. This is a Hellenized phrase. There was always this understanding of the afterlife, Hades. But it began to separate into the comfy Hades, where all of those who believe in faith go, and then the uncomfortable or the torment Hades, which is what is being described here. This is common language, common understanding, common vernacular. In fact, the thief on the cross, we don't know if he was Greek, Hellenist. We don't know if he was Roman. He would have been a pretty lowly man, a slave, or somebody of very low stature if he was Roman, to be crucified. So it's very likely that he was a Hellenistic or a Scythian, a pirate, a barbarian, or something like that. And remember, Jesus was between two of them. And so he would have had very much understanding of this idea. So when he says, "Remember me in your kingdom," talking to Jesus, then Jesus says, "Today I'll see you in paradise." Everybody listening would have known, oh, he's going to Hades. He's going to Hades, but he's not going to the place of torment in Hades. He's going to the place where the righteous dead go. That the thief on the cross would have understood that. Jesus and those listening would have understood that, those who would have heard. And so what Silent Saturday represents is that while Jesus' body was wrapped in what I believe is the Shroud of Turin, which is currently in Turin, Italy, he's there on Saturday. Remember, the disciples are totally freaked out. We left last night quiet, distraught, having observed and witnessed all that took place on Jesus' body. And his body is there in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, I believe the garden tomb, if you go to Israel to see the rocky and the hewn rock tomb. But he didn't stay in there. No, as the Apostles' Creed says, he descended into Hades, to paradise. Why? So that he could look in the face of Moses, look in the face of the prophets and the patriarchs, and he could lead a procession out of Hades. Now, this is so critical. I fully believe that when Paul talks about going to the third heaven and having seen mysteries, could it have been that he saw God, potentially? Could it have also been that when he saw a glimpse into the third heaven, that he saw Adam and Eve and Moses and David and all of these patriarchs and all of these prophets of the faith hanging out, waiting for redemptive history to come to this moment of the cross, the burial, and the resurrection? We don't know. Scripture is silent on those things. But what I do know is starting in the early apostolic fathers. So this is very, very early in church history. Tertullian, who was around 300, they started to write about Silent Saturday. Why? Well, because they were asking the questions. Okay, we're Christians. We believe in Jesus. Well, what about Moses? What about Adam? They lived under the curse. They believed in faith. The writer of Hebrews helps us here. By faith, Adam. By faith, Moses. By faith, right? And yet they were longing for a Messiah. And there was a little homily that was written in the 4th century. This is the late 300s. 300s, friends. Like James probably died around 62, right? John the Beloved probably died right around 100, 92 to 100. This is 300. This is very recent history. And around 300, an anonymous person, just like the writer of Hebrews, anonymous, we don't know who penned, but we know that it was a sermon, penned a little homily. If it were in today's vernacular, it would be a blog post. And they wrote a blog post that I think is absolutely beautiful. If you come from the Anglican tradition, if you come from the Catholic tradition, if you read the Common Book of Prayer, or you've been a part of that, high church tradition, this is a homily that is read and has been read since the 4th century, since the 300s. And when something has been read consistently for that period of time, I think that it's important that we have familiarity with it. And that's the way that I wanted to end this Silent Saturday or Holy Saturday sermonette, is to read this sermon. And it's short, but to read it, for us to envision what it could have looked like. We know that Jesus' body was in the tomb, but where Jesus' godlike soul was, we don't fully know. I'm giving you my best guess here. But to preach to the captives, to preach to those in paradise, and to usher them out to the Father in heaven. And I cannot wait to get to heaven, to ask the details of this moment. I can't wait to say, no, seriously, Jesus, where were you when your body lay in the tomb? What were you doing? Who did you wake up first? What did it look like? And so without further explanation, let me read this homily, like it was read by probably a bishop all of those years ago. The first line is the most impactful. In fact, if you hear a pastor say this or you read this in a book, this is a very powerful first line. Like, it is the best of times, it is the worst of times. Everybody knows who I'm talking about there. And if you don't, Google it. You're welcome. This first line is no different. And so, again, here is the homily. Something strange is happening. There is a great silence on the earth today. A great silence and stillness. The whole earth keeps silence because the King is asleep. The earth trembled and is still because God has fallen asleep in the flesh, and he has raised up all who have slept ever since the world began. God has died in the flesh, and hell trembles with fear. He has gone in search of our first parents, as for a lost sheep, greatly desiring to visit those who live in darkness and in the shadow of death. He has gone to free from sorrow the captive, Adam and Eve. He who both God and the Son Eve, the Lord approached them bearing the cross, the weapon that had won him the victory. At the sight of Adam, the first man he created, he struck his breast in terror and cried out to everyone, "My Lord, be with you all." Christ answered him, "And with your spirit." He took him by the hand and raised him up, saying, "Awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. For I am your God, whom for your sake have become your son. Out of love for you and for your descendants, I now, by my own authority, command all who are here held in bondage to come forth, all who are in darkness to be enlightened, all who are sleeping to arise. I order you, O sleeper, to awake. I did not create you to be held a prisoner in hell. Rise from the dead, for I am life of the dead. Rise up, work of my hands, you who were created in my image. Rise, let us leave this place. For you are in me and I am in you, and together we form one person, and we cannot be separated. For your sake, I, your God, became your son. I, the Lord, took the form of a slave. I, whose home is above the heavens, descended to the earth and beneath the earth. For your sake and for the sake of man, I became like a man without help, free among the dead. For your sake, who left the garden, I was betrayed to the Jews of the garden, and I was crucified in the garden. See on my face the spittle I received in order to restore you to life that I once breathed into you. See there the marks of the blows with which I received in order to refashion your warped nature into my image. On my back, see the marks of scourging that I endured to remove the burden of sin that weighs upon your back. See my hands nailed firmly to a tree, for you once wickedly stretched out your hand to a tree. I slept on a cross, the sword that pierced my side, for you who slept in paradise brought forth Eve from your side. My side has healed the pain in yours. The sword that pierced me has sheathed sword that was turned against you. Rise, let us leave this place. The enemy led you out of the earthly paradise. I will not restore you to that paradise, but I will enthrone you in heaven. For I forbade you the tree that was the only symbol of life. But see, I, who am life itself, am now one with you. I have appointed cherubim to guard you as slaves who guarded, but now I make them worship you as God. The throne formed by cherubim awaits you. It bears swift and eager. The bridal chamber is adorned. The banquet is ready. The eternal dwelling place are prepared. The treasure of the houses of all good things lie open. The kingdom of heaven has been prepared for you for all eternity. This homily, that's it. That's this homily that has been read since the 4th century is an indication of what might have been, what likely was Christ on Silent Saturday. Remember, as a man was in the belly of a fish for 3 days, so will Christ be in the earth in his body for 3 days. So remember, the disciples know nothing of this. The disciples know the concept of this. Many of them would have likely by this point heard that Jesus said, "Today you will be with me in paradise. But remember, they thought that Jesus was going to dethrone Rome. Death was never a part of the idea. This is why Peter says, you are not going to the cross. What does Jesus say? Get behind me, Satan. I am going to the cross. And so already the plan that they thought was to be is starting to unravel. Disciples today, like we are able to look backwards at the cross. We have the full counsel of the finished Word of God. And so we can cross-reference and surmise and think about what might have been. But this, to me, is so powerful. Why? Because Jesus, just like his next coming, the dead will rise first, and then those who live will see him in the air. This is the same model. Those who had already died, the righteous in faith, saw Christ resurrected first. And those who remain alive will see him second on Easter Sunday. I hope and pray. Silent Saturday, this small little Silent Saturday 20-minute sermon blessed you. Why? Because this further gives us energy that builds to Resurrection Sunday. I cannot wait to see you tomorrow. God bless.